All right, Rebecca thinks she has the right button to hit, and it's going to go do that. Hi, everybody. Welcome to ZapCon After Hours. She has the right button to hit, and it's going to go. My name is Nick, and I'll be your host today. And with me, I have Simon Bennett, who's the founder of ZAP and project lead. And he's going to be walking us through the automation framework. Too many words beginning with A. So he's going to walk us through the automation framework and take any questions that you have. Remember to join us in the Discord server, where you can ask your questions, and we will take questions as they come in. We'll also have time at the end for any questions that we didn't get to during the presentation. And if you ask a question in the Discord server, you'll be entered into a drawing for a ZapBot plushie, so some nice swag to encourage you to ask questions. All right, Simon, take it away.
Thank you very much, Nick, and thanks for getting the automation framework wrong so quickly, because I know I'm going to actually make a mistake there. And I keep on calling it the authentication framework or something before correcting myself. So yeah, this is about this is going to be all about the automation framework that we launched at ZapCon. I'm going to try and make it comprehensible to people who are new to ZAP, although this is probably not the easiest way to get started. But I'm also going to make sure I cover enough information for people who are experienced ZAP users. So what I'm going to cover today is the automation framework GUI, the graphical user interface, which you will not have seen before. Now, this actually sounds a little bit counterintuitive. Why do you have a GUI for something that's all about automation? And strictly speaking, you don't need it. You do not need the GUI in order to use the automation framework. You can use the automation framework right as it is right now. However, we know that configuring ZAP to handle applications is non-trivial. And the ZAP desktop makes it much easier to see what's going on. So we always recommend that if you're starting with a new application, testing a new application, you want to automate that, then first of all, you test it in the ZAP desktop before going on to automate it. The only problem is we haven't made it particularly easy to move from the ZAP desktop to automation. And that's one very good reason why we're having the GUI for the automation framework. So what I'm going to do is just let you know what the different options you have for automation. So you know what the possibilities are, and I will share my screen. And hopefully you can see zaproxy.org. So if you see, we have this big option here for automate with ZAP. And if you go here, you'll see all the different options we've got for automating with ZAP. So the first one is the quick start command line. And this is quick and easy, but you can pretty much only put in a URL. You can configure ZAP in other ways, but it's painful. So it's quite limited, and we don't really recommend it for anything non-trivial. We then have GitHub Actions, and we've got 2 at the moment. Hopefully we can have a 3rd one, the API scan coming soon. So GitHub Actions are great if you're using GitHub. But we've also got the package scans, and the GitHub Actions actually use the Docker package scans. And so we have the baseline scan, the API scan, and the full scan. And these are much more flexible and a great way to automate ZAP. But there's a problem in that they are dependent on Docker. So if you don't want to use Docker, you're kind of stuffed here. And the configuration does get a bit, we have a certain set of configuration things we can support quite easily. But once you start trying to support more advanced options, they become more tricky, and they are limited in some respects. So then we have, I'm going to skip over the automation framework, because obviously that's what we're going to be talking about mostly. We've got the API and daemon mode. And basically, you can put ZAP in the background and in daemon mode, and then you've got the ZAP API. And that gives you nearly as much control as you have over ZAP in desktop mode. So very powerful. But we have found that it's a bit too much for a lot of people, and it doesn't really hold your hand. You've got to understand everything that goes on and be very precise. So the reason we've also introduced the automation framework is to make something that's more flexible than the package scans, that can be run from the command line, but is still really powerful. And in fact, we're reworking the package scans, and that means the GitHub Actions as well, to use the automation framework. So that's why we've got the automation framework. And I will now switch over to ZAP. So this is ZAP 2.10.0, and by default, you won't have the automation framework installed. You will need to go to the marketplace. So do that, go check for updates and check on the marketplace. Now, I do have it installed, so I don't need to do that. But if you haven't got it installed, then go to the marketplace, check for updates, and install it from there. So right now, if you install it from the marketplace, you will not get the GUI. The GUI, part of the GUI is available in the weekly release, which only just gone out today, a bit late. But the GUI I'm showing, not all the changes aren't in the weekly release because I'm still just tweaking them. Still a few things that need fixing. I was hoping to get them out, but didn't quite manage it. But that will be released very soon, and we will announce that on the user group and Twitter and all those usual things. But there is a pull request outstanding, so you can try it out if you really want to. But what there is you'll get a new automation tab. So this tab is available in the weekly release, but you don't get all of these icons. So what we have here is a variety of options. And one thing we can do is we can load an existing plan, which I'm not going to do in this case, because I'm going to create a new plan. And actually, this isn't really how we recommend you use the automation framework. We recommend you actually start testing your application first and get it working well in the desktop before creating the automation plan around it. But I'm going to start with just creating a plan just so you can see what happens. So you get this pop-up and you will be able to choose any of the contexts you have available. And then you've got a selection of jobs. If you don't select anything, you will get warned you need to select at least one job. And you can use the control key or whatever is relevant, and you can select as many as you like. But we have these profiles, and the custom one is basically nothing. The baseline one is equivalent to the baseline scan, so that does not include the active scan. We have the full scan, which does include the active scan, and then we have the API ones, which select the relevant API add-on and does a full scan on those. So I'm just going to do a baseline scan and save that. And what you'll see is the plan is then represented in the tab underneath. And we have a new option. We can save the plan now, and we can actually run the plan. And so I'm going to run the plan, even though it's actually not that good an idea. But you'll see that it errors straight away. And you'll see that because there are no URLs defined in the context, we actually have an output tab here as well, and any errors are kind of highlighted. So you can see I've created this environment now. I created it from a default context, but the default context was empty. There's nothing to do here. Now, with these jobs, basically, you've got the jobs and the environment and various jobs. If you double click on them, then you'll get a pop-up with the configuration. And some of the pop-ups have multiple tabs, and some of them have complex controls. In this case, we've got the contexts, and you'll see this context is empty. And see, there's no URL. So I'm going to put in example.com. Now, you normally shouldn't try and attack any site you don't have permission to attack to test, but in this case, I'm just going to do a passive scan, so I'm not really doing any attacking. So I am just going to save that, and then I'm going to run the plan again. And say this time it actually works, and we switch over to using the spider tab and we'll see there the spider is actually completed, and we're now running the Ajax spider. I've made sure that we don't actually, it doesn't pop up any windows because it'd be kind of a bit annoying. And then we've generated a report. So if we have a look at the output tab, we'll see a lot of information there. And we've got this report. So I will copy that URL and see if I can see it here. And there we go. So that is the report that was generated by the automated scan, automation framework. So hopefully you'll see that is quite straightforward. It allows you to create these things. Now, one thing I want to do is make sure that it actually runs from the command line as well. So in order to do that, I need to save it. So I'll save it. And now what I need to do is go to the command line. So hopefully I've got the budget.yaml file. Now I've got a zap.sh file. Just show you that basically because I'm on a Mac, it's a bit of a pain to remember that path. So I just have this little shell script to make it easier for me. And then hopefully I've got the command for running the budget.yaml file. And I'm using this backquoted print working directory because it's always because the standard ZAP shell actually changes the directory. So it's good to have it's best to specify the full path there. So if I kick that off, then hopefully it should run. And there we see the same thing. It's running and now because it's doing the Ajax spider, unfortunately, Firefox puts loads of rubbish onto standard out. That's not much, there's not much we can do about that, I'm afraid. And one thing I have noticed as part of the testing is for some reason, when I use the Ajax spider from the command line, it doesn't exit. So that's something I've got to fix before this gets released. You see the report is generated. So hopefully that report is going to look pretty similar. You can see that was generated at 1522 and on now 1724. So we've basically got the same thing. So we've we've created the automation plan and we've run it in the GUI and we've run it from the command line and it does exactly the same thing, which is kind of what we want. So one thing I do want to point out is you actually see there are some little arrows here, and that is because we've got some additional things here. And these don't look so good. So what we have is, so we got various concepts in the automation framework. One is the environment, which I've already shown you. So this is where we define the contexts and various other things. Then we have a series of jobs. But then what we have is we can add tests to jobs. And tests can do various different things. And we actually add tests by default to the spider and the Ajax spider. And if we double click on that, we will see that this is testing the lead 100 URLs are found. And what it's doing, these are statistics tests. So ZAP maintains a whole load of statistics, and you can test any of those. And you can actually, so you've got a set of operators, and you can choose what values. Now, these are only integer statistics you can test at the moment. But this makes it very powerful because one of the things it's always difficult to tell when you're doing automation is whether things are actually working the way you expect. But you'll see that even though this test failed, the job carried on. And the reason for that is, if we have a look here, we've got an on-fail option, and the on-fail is info. So I'm going to change that to warn and save, and I'm actually going to get rid of the Ajax spider. So you see, when I actually select any of these things, some of these buttons will get enabled or disabled. So one thing we can actually, we'll just delete the Ajax spider because I'm just going to show you the test with the standard spider here. And what I'll do is I've changed that. I think I changed it to warn. Good. And I will rerun the job. And there's a spider running. And we'll see that now the test failed as before. And in this case, we've got a warning on the spider job. And if we look at the output again, you'll see that there's a warning as well. And that's because we only found 6 URLs instead of 100. So why did it carry on? Because in the environment, I said to fail on error, but only fail on warning, not to fail on warning. So if I actually change that and run it again, then we should see that when we go back to that actually stopped. So if you say fail on warning, then if there's a warning, then the whole job will fail. That's useful if there are, so in this particular case, you might be expecting to find, at least 100 URLs, and in this case, you didn't. Now you'll notice there are actually some other options there. So you can choose not to even fail on error, but I'll turn fail on warning off, and just to show this works, change that to, so let's rerun that again. So that should carry on this time. But if I change that to error, then what will happen is the whole job will fail, and the plan will therefore fail as well. And you'll see all this in the output tab. Now, what we can do, so obviously in this particular case, this is failing because there aren't that many URLs on example.com. So we can change that to put it down to 4. And this time, if we run the job, the plan, we should see that actually passes. And you can see here, so it found 6 URLs and it's greater or equal to 4, therefore the test passed. So these tests are added by default to the spider and to the active scanner, but you can change them or you can remove them if you want. And one thing I'll point out is every time we actually run a new plan, it actually resets the statistics. So if you're using ZAP for something else, you'll see the statistics keep on getting reset. That's because we're kind of assuming that when you're doing this, you are actually testing the plan itself, and you want to make sure that that's working. So, I mean, one thing we have, so we are actually planning to, so there is another test available. What you can do is you'll see if I select a job, then we've got the option to add a test. And in that case, I think actually only it works on the passive scan config. So let's, yeah, we have, no, passive scan wait it works on. Yes, so we have also alert tests. Now, these are tests, these only work on the passive scan wait jobs and the active scan job. And this actually tests to see whether alerts were actually raised or not. So you can actually choose to pass if they're absent or pass if they're present. Whether you actually, these probably aren't going to be useful in many cases. So actually using those as part of the new retest functionality that's being worked on, part of Google Summer of Code. But we're also planning some other tests. So we're thinking of adding a URL test, so you can test to see whether specific URLs exist and whether they've got specific content, and whether, so both in the body and in the headers as well. So if you want to make sure that you are actually successfully logging in and that you're seeing certain content, you will be able to test for that. So the tests, I think, will make it much easier to make sure so that you can be assured that the automation plans are doing exactly what you expect. So what I'm going to do now is we'll see that, I mean, as you'd expect, all of this stuff gets added to ZAP as we're going through. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a new ZAP session. And normally you would expect everything to get deleted, and you'll see all the sites have gone. But in this case, the automation plan has not been removed. And that's because we kind of expect that you are actually working on plans, and they're essentially independent of the sites. They're a recipe of what to do. They're not kind of state data really. So what I want to do now is I want to create a slightly more realistic example. So say you want to test a new site, and I'm just going to spider it for now. So I'm just going to go for the traditional budget, and we'll see, great. So it explored that application. And what we recommend, if this is something which is new to you, an application that's new to you, is you should really have a look at the sites tree and make sure it's an accurate representation of your site. And that's something I'm not going to go through in this session, but I've recorded other videos about that. So have a look at the videos on zaproxy.org if you want to learn more about that. But this is where, this is where you would actually include it in a context. We'll create a new context, and contexts in ZAP allow you to specify all sorts of things. So we've got include and exclude URLs. We can specify how the structure works, what technology, if we know what technology is there, and authentication, users, session management, all these wonderful things. Now, right now, the automation framework does not support authentication. That is coming hopefully fairly soon, but doesn't support that yet. But when it does, then it will pick it up from these contexts. So what I want to do now is create a new plan. So I will create a new plan. It's going to warn me that the current plan is unsaved, but I don't mind that. And go for budget, and I'm going to go for a full scan. And even though you've selected that, you can go in and highlight any of these things. So I'm going to turn the Ajax spider off, or unselect that, because I know that'll take a little while. So that is the new plan I've got. But I'm also going to do something else. So the active scan will take a long time. So I'm going to double click on that. And you'll see we've got various options. We've got some advanced options here as well, which I'll go through in a bit. But we have policy defaults, and I'm actually going to turn all of the rules off. And then what we can do is we can specify overrides. So I'm going to add the cross-site scripting reflected rule, and I'm going to put that back on medium. So you can put as many as you like in here, but you can set the overall threshold and strength, the default one, and then override it in these rules. So hopefully that will be all I need to do, and I will then run this plan. So you can see that the spider finished running. If you can see down here, hopefully you can see that we're going through the passive scan thread, and then we kicked off the active scan. And this all integrates with the rest of the GUI, so we can see that there's just one plugin, the cross-site scripting reflected rule, which is being run and generated the report. So let's have a look at the output, and we can copy that. There is actually an option to display the report if you want, but it will undoubtedly display it in the wrong browser for me. So here we can see we found the cross-site scripting vulnerability and a load of various other things. So that shows you how the way we're kind of expecting you to actually create automation plans. We're expecting you to try them out in the using the other ZAP tools, and then create plans from those, from what you've been doing. So the idea is you'll be able to create a plan which exactly reflects what you've been doing. You can try it out from the desktop and from the command line as well. So actually just save that as well. So full.yaml and go to have full.yaml. So try running that. And because I had the Ajax spider turned off, we'll have less rubbish on the screen. So here we can set the default threshold, strength to medium threshold off. And here now where we're running the rule, we're actually setting the rules. So that's the scan rule, the cross-site scripting one. And then we generated the report. So I'll copy that and just double check. And yes, we found the cross-site scripting vulnerability again. So you can see you'll be able to do a load of manual testing within ZAP. You'll then be able to export whatever you've done into an automation plan, and you'll be able to run that automation plan from the command line. So what I'll do now is just kind of walk you through the options we've got at the moment. This GUI, graphical user interface, is very new, so it will change based on feedback and based on things we've got planned. So I've already shown you the new plan dialog. You can load a plan as well. You can run the plan. What we've got here is we have an option for adding a job. This will only add one job at a time. So it's not particularly, that's why we've got the option for adding a load of jobs at the start. We may actually well make it easier to add multiple jobs. But at the moment, you can see we've got this selection of all the jobs, and you can actually add more jobs, the same job. So I can actually add the add-on job, and we'll see we've actually got 2 add-on jobs, which doesn't seem very sensible, but you might actually want to load certain add-ons, after you've done something for some reason, or remove them for some reason. So that's the add job. We've got the remove job there, so we can basically remove any of the jobs. And then if you want to change the order, so say we actually want to put the Ajax spider back in, you'll see actually when you add jobs, then the job dialog pops up immediately, because there's a good chance you actually want to make some configuration. But say you actually want to run the Ajax spider before the standard one, we have the option here to move jobs up or move them down as well. And you'll see that we can actually add, so we can add tests if we want, and you can add as many as you like. And we can remove tests as well, which I showed you before. So we can remove those as well. So these controls basically allow you to manipulate the jobs and the tests to configure them how you want. You can, of course, just do everything from a text editor, but we thought it was important to be able to do it from the GUI as well. What I'll do now is I will actually create a new plan, and I will just include all of the jobs. So I can walk you through them so you can see what we can do. So the first one was the environment, which I showed you before. So the environment is always the first one, and you can't move it up and down, and you cannot move any add-ons above it. So you can basically define, you can add as many contexts here as you want, but it's easier to do that when you create it, the plan at the start. Got these options for what to do, and you will be able to actually set variables that will be able to can be used later on in the plan. Then typically the next one is the add-on jobs. And in this case, we've got the option to check for updates and basically update any add-ons that are out of date, which is always recommended, particularly for things like scan rules, because if we release new or updated scan rules, then you'll make sure, if you have that option enabled, you'll make sure you have the latest versions of these. Then you can install specified add-ons, and you can uninstall them. Right now, you have to actually know the add-on ID. Hopefully, I'll be able to change that to so you can have a pull down with all the available ones at some point in the near future. Then we have the passive scan config job. So this is, you don't actually have to have this if you want to go with all the defaults. But what you can do is you can actually set the maximum number of rules to be alerts to be raised for each rule, and we do recommend that. That should probably actually default to 10 is kind of quite good for automation. The maximum body size in bytes to scan, if you have problems with particularly large responses, say you've got some very big PDFs, you might find that some of the passive scan rules can take too long. So you can actually specify the maximum body size here, and that will then skip those responses. We recommend you have the scan only and scope option. And by default, when running plans, we disable tags. And that's because when you're running the automation plans, we assume you're not using the GUI. So it makes sense to disable the tags, and that will speed things up. So what you can also do is you can actually change the thresholds on any of the rules. So you can actually turn them off, put them to low, medium, or high. Right now, you can't change all of them globally. That's planned, so we will actually add that in the not too distant future. Then we've got quite a fun little add-on called the requester. So what we found is that, what you'll see, all of these, the initial jobs, so the requester and then the API ones and the two spiders, these are all about exploring your application. And we've often had requests for people to say, well, is there any way we actually specify exactly which URLs to request? And you can do via the other automation mechanisms, but it's a bit tricky. So what we've got is we have this new requester job, and this was actually implemented by one of our students who's working on the Google Summer of Code project. And this allows you to specify a whole load of requests, as many as you like. And these will just be then made when the job runs. And you can add new ones, and you can put all these details in manually, or hopefully you'll have actually done all this testing manually first. So you can go into the sites tree and you say, okay, well, this is the request that I want to make. And you'll see that it puts in the method, the data, and the response code. But obviously you can change all of those, and you can add as many of these requests that you want. So that will then basically define, you see if there's a summary there, the number of URLs. So it'll define any requests that you want to make. And when that job runs, it will make those requests. We then have a set of jobs for APIs. So we've got the GraphQL one, and actually can't remember, no, we didn't have a, looking to see if there's an advanced option. But so this basically allows you to select either an endpoint schema URL, and I haven't actually got any examples here, but you'll be able to select that or type it in and be able to select a file from the command line as well. So this allows you to basically load a GraphQL schema. And we do have some advanced options if you want to tweak these things. But if you don't know what they do, then probably the best thing is not to set them. But if you have played around with the GraphQL add-on, then you might know more about these things, and you might be able to want to actually set those to specific things. And similarly, we have a job for the OpenAPI. So you can import an OpenAPI file URL and specify the target URL. And likewise for SOAP. You'll see these don't have any advanced options, quite straightforward. Then we have the spider. So this is the ZAP traditional spider. So it's very effective for more traditional applications, but doesn't work so well for modern web applications. And this one has some of the more common options. And then we've got the advanced options. So we've got options on parsing and a lot of so the advanced options, which should be familiar if you've played around with the existing spider. Then we've got the Ajax spider. And again, so we've got standard options. Now, by default, both the spiders work on the first context defined in the job. But if you actually want to specify what it is, you can do that. You can also specify the URL to start as well. But we have got advanced options here as well, and you can actually specify which type of browser. By default, they'll use whatever you've got configured by default, which is usually Firefox headless, but you can choose any of the available options and set in any of those advanced options as well. Then we have this passive scan wait job, and it's very simple. It just specifies a duration, and this is in minutes, and this is how long it will wait for the passive scan queue to go down. So what happens is when ZAP explores an application, when you proxy any requests through ZAP, or if you use any of the spiders or import URLs, then ZAP will start to passively scan these things. And you hopefully noticed that we've got the passive scan queue down here, which went down when that job run. So the passive scan queue will run, this passive scan thread will run all of the time, but this job is basically, it'll wait until that passive scan queue goes down to 0, or if you specify a time, so if it's 0, it'll wait until the queue goes down to 0, or it'll wait for how many minutes you specify. And that is recommended because otherwise you will miss out on a whole load of passive scan alerts. Then we have the active scan job, which I showed you before. So you've got the policy that you can set. You can select an existing policy. There will be an option to kind of duplicate that policy in the automation plan as well. And we've got advanced options for those of you who want to play around with those. Then there's one job which you probably aren't going to need to do anything with, and actually it hasn't even got a UI. So the output summary job is really there for the package scans. So we might actually remove it from the GUI here, from the default set of jobs you can add, but that is used by the package scans to actually make sure that to provide the compatibility that we need. Then we have a reporting job, and this has got, so this is very similar to the report GUI that you can use in the desktop. So you can give the report title, name, directory, option to display the report, which you don't normally want to do in automation, but that will launch it from ZAP. If you choose that, you can then choose any of the templates and the themes, the sections, and the filters as well. So it's very similar to the options. If I just go into, I want to generate a report right now, you'll see that the options are actually very similar. And that is the final set of, that's the final job that we have available at the moment. The plan is we will add more jobs as and when we see the need, or as requested. I don't think we actually have any pending immediately. But so that is really the state of the automation framework GUI right now. I said it's not available just yet. I'm hoping to get this tidied up and released very shortly. If you actually want to hear when that is, then follow ZA Proxy on Twitter or join the ZAP user group. We'll probably announce it on the Discord channel as well. What we're going to plan, what's next for the automation framework? We want to carry on replacing more of the package scan functionality. But the main thing, one of the key things is authentication support. So we want to make sure that we can actually support all of the authentication options that ZAP supports. So all of these things we want to kind of move into the automation framework as well. Once we've done that, I think the automation framework becomes much more powerful and more of you be able to use it. While we're talking about that, I will actually mention that the automation framework and ZAP as a whole does actually support one form of authentication already. So if I just switch to, if I go back to ZAP and have a look at the documentation, it's a little bit hidden away. We have a look at the desktop user guide and authentication mechanisms. No, it is just under authentication. Yes, so under authentication, you'll see that ZAP actually has support for authentication header environmental variables. So basically, if you specify ZAP auth header value as an environmental variable, then ZAP will use that as a header to all the requests, and it will put that value in the standard authorization header. Unless, of course, you specify the ZAP auth header, in which case it'll use that value for the header instead of the standard authorization one. And if you specify ZAP auth header site, then you will only use the header whose name includes the value of that environmental variable. So these environmental variables throughout ZAP. So even though the automation framework doesn't actually directly support authentication, if you use that one of those, particularly specifically the ZAP auth header value, but optionally any of the other ones as well, then you will actually be able to get support authentication through the ZAP automation framework. So that's all I was going to go through for this session. One thing I will mention is that we've had, we have actually made some very good progress early on with the automation framework because we had a couple of students working on it. Unfortunately, they are now working on their own Google Summer of Code projects for ZAP. So progress has slowed down a little bit, but if you're a Java developer, it's actually quite easy to get into this. So if you fancy contributing to it and know a bit of Java, then please get in touch with me and I will get you started. But that is all I was going to cover. So Nick, do we have any questions?
We do. So I'll take them in the order they came in. So Twok asked in Discord, is this automation framework kind of like an enhancement of trying to run ZAP in daemon mode on a CI/CD pipeline?
Essentially, yes. The daemon mode is, you have to control it via the API and it gets complicated. So what we're trying to do is make it much easier to control ZAP in CI/CD. And previously, the recommendation was to use the package scans. We still recommend the package scans will still be a great way to configure, to run ZAP in CI/CD, but there are some limitations, one of which is you've got to use Docker. And if you go outside the standard set of parameters and the way of working they work, then they're not so good. But the package scans will use the automation framework under the hood. But if you want to jump straight to the automation framework or use it because you've got to the limits of the package scans, then yes, this will be a great way to go. And going forwards, this will be the recommended way for automating ZAP.
Awesome. All right, next question is from the BAP. Is it possible to control specific add-ons directly through the automation framework?
Essentially, yes. I mean, all of these things, so each job is essentially associated, they're typically associated with an add-on. Some of them, things like the passive scan config and the spider and the active scan, those are controlling the core. But these spider Ajax one, that is controlling the Ajax spider add-on directly, as is the GraphQL one, the OpenAPI, the SOAP, and the report add-on. So you can think of these things. So each job represents a piece of functionality, and that often maps down to a ZAP add-on.
Makes sense. All right, next question is from Mr. Mosey. He's asking, how easy will this be to add as a stage in a dev Azure pipeline? You're familiar with Azure at all?
Well, not really. I mean, basically, you will be able to run ZAP as I showed here. So it's one command. So you can run ZAP from the command line, specifying the minus command and minus auto run and the file. Now, so if you can, so hopefully pretty much all CI/CD pipelines will be able to do that. You will be able to do this in Docker as well if you want to, but you won't have to use Docker if you don't want to. We don't have an official Azure CI/CD ZAP job. We don't actually, in the core team, we don't really have those skills, but if someone wants to contribute and maintain one of those things, I'd love to hear from you. But basically, if your CI/CD pipeline supports you running stuff from the command line, then it should be very easy to run ZAP automation plans from there.
Excellent. Next question is from Sayus, who is asking, do JWT tokens work yet?
Well, they're really part of authentication. And I said the only authentication support we've got is via those environmental variables. So if you can get a JWT that you can put in a header, put in the environmental variable, then those will work, but you'll have to do that.
Excellent. Next question is from Mohammed. He's asking, is there a way to report the results through Jenkins reports rather than an HTML?
So someone else has asked that as well. We don't have that at the moment, but I believe, so we've got a new reporting framework, and it's very easy to add new reports, and they can be in all sorts of formats. So I don't think it'll be too difficult to add a Jenkins report, but we haven't had a chance to look at that yet. But if anyone fancies having a go at that, get in touch with me. I can explain everything about the report framework. If you know about those things and fancy contributing a bit of time, then yeah, get in touch and we'll see what we can do together.
So a couple people are asking how to get the automation tab. Is that something where they just need to add it currently, or do we still need to wait on the final version of this being released?
So you can, if you run the ZAP weekly, there will be the automation tab, but you'll only see this. It only has the kind of load plan and run plan, because the rest of the stuff hasn't been committed. If we actually have a look at, if we go to the ZAP extensions repository, we will see somewhere that is my pull request. So it's got the new plan dialog, whole load of things. It's actually failing because I just had one of the changes broke one of the tests. So we'll have to wait until this PR is merged. I will be focusing on that tomorrow and Friday. Once it's merged, I'm hoping we will be able to release a new version of the automation framework. So hopefully this week, again, follow ZA Proxy on Twitter, or we'll announce it. We'll also announce it on the ZAP user group and probably on Discord as well.
Excellent. Yep. So yeah, follow us on Twitter or follow the user group to be notified. We'll also post it in the Discord and various other places. I think we've covered all the questions that were asked. So if you do have any last minute questions, type them into the Discord or the YouTube chat now. While we're giving you an opportunity to do that, I was curious for my own question, what are some of the challenges that you ran into getting this automation framework running and getting the GUI up and running?
To be honest, the hardest part has been the GUI. It's not really hard. It's just time consuming and getting it, with all the right defaults and picking things up. And it's just, it takes longer than expected. I knew it would take a while, but yeah, the GUI work always takes longer than the actual functionality. So that's been the most painful part. I think we found that early on, when we were actually working on the pure functionality before the GUI was available, we were actually able to make very good progress. That's what I said, if you are a Java developer and want to get involved, we'll be able to give you some useful little tasks, because it's quite easy to add small amounts of functionality to the automation framework. We just need, it needs to be consistent, it needs to have tests, it needs to work. And, just adding, support for one type of authentication would be awesome, for example. Or yeah, there's loads of things we want to do. So if you want to get involved, please let us know.
Awesome. Looks like we don't have any other further questions. Just a comment from Mr. Mosey saying Simon rocks. So I agree and concur wholeheartedly. So yeah, thank you for all your hard work, and thank you for walking us through what you've done. I imagine there'll be more videos upcoming on the automation framework as it goes live. So we'll probably have a deep dive at some point in the future. Thank you to everyone who attended and for asking questions. And thank you as always, Simon. And we will see everyone in the next ZapCon after hours. All right.
Thank you very much, Nick.
Bye, folks.
See you, folks.